Hey everybody, my name's Ben Helde, and I am the plant record specialist and taxonomist at Juniper Level Botanic Garden, the home of Plant Delights Nursery. We have a lot of interesting kind of nursery plants to highlight today, surrounding flower fragrance and foliage fragrance, and kind of different evolutionary adaptations that these plants produce compounds to either defend themselves or attract pollinators. So kind of along those lines, this side I have a lot of our fragrant foliage plant, fragrant flower plants that we have for sale. I decided to do this here instead of kind of walking around the garden because this time of year the plants that we have that are fragrant are kind of spread throughout the garden, so I thought I'd just kind of pull everything together and do a more condensed version here. But yeah, so I guess evolutionarily early on, plants mostly used color to attract pollinators, and those visual cues that pollinators used early on evolutionarily really worked well, but this secondary evolutionary breakthrough, I guess, with fragrance helped with pollination and kind of attracting even further to specific plant species. And they also attract pollinators over a longer distance, so not only what the insect can see, but also what the insect can perceive, I guess, fragrance-wise. It would guide insects directly to the pollen source rather than kind of having to have them I don't know, use other means via sight or whatever it may be to access that pollen. And then this also helps them distinguish themselves from other flowering plants. So if there's a very specialized insect for a very specialized plant, those fragrances can help with those processes as well. So bees are generally attracted to sweeter fragrances. As you know, things like flies and beetles are often attracted to kind of putrid smells like rotting flesh and garbage and things like that. Bats kind of like a musky, fermenting, fruity odor, mostly probably night flowering species, which I'll kind of get to in a little bit. And then they also use kind of scent as mimicry in a lot of ways. So things like the famous Amorphophallus titanum or the Titan arum uses mimicry to kind of get flies and other insects to come pollinate, thinking that they are accessing a dead animal perhaps, or something along those lines. So there's all sorts of different reasons why insects use flower fragrance specifically. But also interestingly, I guess plants do kind of have their own sort of circadian rhythm, which I alluded to before. And that allows things to, or flowers to allow things like moths and other maybe dusk or nighttime active insects that plants are ready to be pollinated or accessed. Let's see, oh yeah, I guess I'll move on to foliage fragrance next, and that's on this side. Just have a few examples here. But this is a completely different adaptation evolutionarily. While these are for pollinators, this is pretty much entirely a defense mechanism to keep herbivores and insects away from kind of chomping, which if you're local to our area or many places around the US, deer pressure is a really big deal. So a lot of these plants are what you would consider kind of more deer resistant plants due to their compounds in the foliage. Let's see. Yeah, so I guess to get a little bit more technical, I guess when you crush some foliage on something like a salvia or mint relative or any fragrant plant, you're breaking the cells where those compounds are stored, often as essential oils or other very fragrant compounds. And so that is kind of, I mean, we usually rub the leaf to try to get some smell. Most animals would be chomping or scratching at certain plants, and that would release the scent, which would in turn deter them from continuing to eat that specific foliage, and ideally move on to something else. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of all I have for big picture stuff. So I'll just kind of go into some of these plants individually. starting with this Colocasia. This is one of the plants that I think has kind of a not so great fragrance. So it has these yellow spathe and spadix flowers that are kind of much more diminutive than a lot of the other larger Colocasia and aroid species. But it kind of smells to me like a very chemically chocolate fragrance, sort of like maybe a Tootsie Roll mixed with an Expo marker or something, like very kind of medicinal. Interesting fragrance, and I can smell this from pretty far away. We have it planted in the founder's garden, and I should mention the name. This is Colocasia. The cultivar is Jenningsii. It's affinis is the specific epithet, and it has this really nice kind of dark foliage with green veins and a sort of light center, which is pretty unusual, and it's kind of like one of our more dwarf Colocasia species. So yeah, this will kind of spread more rapidly in a moist condition than in drier areas, but it's a great plant and pretty unusual fragrance. I can't exactly place what insect pollinates these, although I imagine it's probably fungus, gnats, or some sort of flies of some sort. So next we have the Heliotropium Augusta or August lavender, and this also has pretty kind of like a delicate sweet fragrance. It's not super strong right now, but definitely much more pleasant than the Colocasia. This flowers for us for a very long period throughout the summer, and I guess the clumps stay at around 2 feet by 3 foot, so a good mound. We have a very good example of it over at our welcome berm, and otherwise butterflies, bees, all sorts of pollinating insects really do love this plant, along with pretty much every other, if not every other plant that I'll be talking about for flowers. This could be a pollinator talk if you want it to be that. And so it does spread a little bit, but not in any invasive way. So it'll kind of keep to itself and stay in a pretty tidy clump. And the next one we do have in the nursery, although the plants in the nursery aren't currently in flower. So I got some specimens from the garden, but this is one of my very favorite plants. This is Sinningia tubiflora. Tubiflora referring to the very tubular flower. And Doug has highlighted this plant, I'm sure, a number of times. I think it smells just like Fruit Loops. It smells very, very fruity. And due to its very long tube flower, hummingbirds are generally the main, I guess, animal that is attracted to this plant, but has a nice stature, a fuzzy kind of low-growing foliage, and these long, I guess, maybe 2-foot stalks, 20-inch stalks, with these really nice long tubular flowers. So this is a plant that everyone should have in their garden. They make these interesting kind of tubers that look almost like potatoes and of varying sizes as the plant kind of spreads and continues to grow. Next is Echinacea purpurea fragrant angel, and this is a Terra Nova introduction with white flower, or I guess white petals and a yellow center. And it is also fragrant, not super fragrant right now, but it kind of smells like a florist, like very classic floral fragrance. Many of the Echinacea purpureas are fragrant, although this one was selected for, I guess, particularly selected for its fragrance. And aside from that, it's the Echinacea we all know and love. Great for pollinators, great for a meadowy situation. Well-drained soils are good for this plant, kind of much prefers those. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Let me fix this. And next up we have Polianthes, which is on the ground because it's a little top heavy. But this is a Mexican native geophyte that flowers in the summertime. Has creamy white flowers as they open, and then they get pretty bright white. Very similar fragrance to kind of our classic gardenia in the garden, like super kind of over the top, sweet and very, very floral. So yeah, this is a classic plant that I think is grown kind of throughout the US for cut flowers, and where it's native, it does have some medicinal value from what I've researched. So yeah, just another all-around interesting classic plant. And then Aloysia virgata is an interesting kind of semi-woody plant, woody in some areas, and it will die back in others. But it has a very, very nice fragrance. Another white-flowered plant. It takes very well to cutting back, so you can cut this plant back. It flowers on new wood, so anything that flowers on old wood, you really have to be careful about where you prune and how deeply you prune, because you could miss a year's worth of flowering the following year, but this is not the case for this plant. It can grow up to 8 feet perennially, and well, I guess it would be perennial in cooler climates, kind of more of a woody plant in warmer climates like I mentioned before. Another great pollinator, kind of intermediate soil conditions will be best for it. And yeah, that kind of rounds out our flower stuff. And then just very briefly, I'll talk a little bit about some foliage, starting with Anise hyssop. This is Blue Fortune, and the foliage smells just like black licorice. So anise is the common name, or Anise hyssop, so referring to anise, which is another herb that produces that very licoricey scent. And then this plant was kind of bred for its very upright habit and I guess reasonably long flowering period. So it does have really nice, relatively unfragrant flowers. But so you're getting all your fragrance from the foliage itself. But otherwise, just kind of similar story to the rest of the plants that I've mentioned. Sort of meadowy, open look with pretty dense flowering and some really great smelling foliage. And then this is a really unusual plant. This is Eysenhardtia texana, and the cultivar we have here is Uvalde, from Uvalde, Texas. And this is a Patrick McMillan collection of a really unusual plant, woody in our area, but the foliage to me smells like burning tires, kind of. One of the plants I picked that has a very bad smell, in my opinion. Some people think it's citrusy. I just think it smells horrible. But it is a great plant for, especially kind of for the rock garden situation, well-drained soils. Most of the things that we have that are native to West Texas or that kind of like southern region do best for us in very well-drained conditions. Yeah, I guess it is a host plant for the southern dog-faced butterflies, which I had recently learned about those, and it is one of our 2026 introductions for this year. So it's a new plant for us in the nursery. So yeah, that's all I've got for today. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or get in touch, and I'll see you in the garden. Thank you.